Retail is not dead. In fact, all signs are showing that retail is actually on the rise. But the retail experience isn't going to be what it has always been in the past. The world of retail is evolving, and brands of all kinds are trying to find the best ways to give their customers what they want and need across all channels, including in stores. Anjee Solanki, the National Retail Director for the USA at Colliers, has an inside look at what that next evolution of retail will look like. And she shared her insights and data on this episode of Up Next in Commerce. I'm your host, Stephanie Postles, CEO of Mission.org, and let's get into it. Before we jump into the interview, I want to give a quick shout out to our partners, Salesforce Commerce Cloud, who help make this podcast possible. You can learn more about Salesforce Commerce Cloud by visiting salesforce.com/commerce. All right, let's jump into it. Today, I'm so excited to dive into the world of retail. I'm here with Anjee. Anjee, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So I know I called you this, before, that I consider you an OG in the world of retail. You've been working in it for, I think you said 31 years, which is very impressive. You are the person I'm going to ask all my questions to. So it's going to be a good chat. So earlier we talked about travel. You mentioned before we started recording, travel was what kind of brought many pivotal moments into your career. And I wanted you to tell me why and what was maybe one of the most craziest travel experiences that you remember.
So travel is really important to me personally, and something I really want to share with others. I have learned so much. So I was very fortunate. My dad, retired pilot, worked for the airlines, and so he had that in his DNA. And apparently, it kind of made its way down. So I started to travel at the age of 6, and what I really enjoyed is I developed such great memories, fond memories, memories of, you know, getting to know people, meeting other people, kids, of course, at that time, and just playing outside, and how natural and how exciting that was because it was different. I was in another country, meeting other people. We had language barriers, but yet we still connected and we formed friendships, and that still lives with me today because I really look at those early kind of stages or phases in life as learning lessons. So when I'm, out traveling and going to countries, I don't really look at, oh, is this going to be a challenge in terms of how am I going to get from point A to B or any of those things. I really kind of just let loose and just go and explore. And my favorite thing to do is explore cities, just spontaneously with no agenda, not looking for kind of where are the tourists hanging out or where's the best Instagram location. More just kind of walking from 8 in the morning until 10 at night, exploring the streets, the cities, the people, and sitting down and having a conversation. So it's a huge passion. It's a constant passion. And so with that, I wouldn't say it's the craziest, but it's definitely the most memorable for me was a trip to Antarctica. And the two or three things that really come to mind is when we had to we actually took a very small 100-person, call it boat vessel. And as we were going from Ushuaia, which is in the southern South America, I should say, and traveling down to Antarctica, you have to go through this uh, passage, and this passage is really where the Atlantic and the Pacific meet. It's very violent, and
Oh yeah,
it
I've seen
reminded me of these,
videos.
those movies, right?
Mhm.
The movies you watch and you're like, this is actually happening. And we were sitting having our dinner, and all of a sudden, I picked up my fork and my knife, and the entire table just whooshed disappear right below us. And I was like, oh my gosh. And it was because this massive like movement in body of water just started to move us back and forth. And of course, we all had to go back into our rooms. But that moment, that experience, and that laughter and that fear, all of the, emotions that you get just all happened at once. And it was actually exhilarating. And I wasn't very young, so
Oh,
it was
you're
just
that kind
happened a
of
few years
person.
back.
Like semi-dangerous things
Yeah, I
happen
was
and
like,
you're
let's
like, oh, that was
go.
kind of
It was
fun.
like the roller coaster ride, the A ticket. And it was just so amazing. The other part of that experience was waking up and just seeing the natural beauty that our world has to offer and how sometimes we need to be humbled by that. because it's just a gorgeous. I mean, we are so fortunate that we live where we live. This planet is just phenomenal in terms of what it offers. And so, waking up to that natural beauty and then having the experience to actually land on ice. It was kind of like this kind of isolated iceberg experience where we actually landed on the ice and we were standing there and you're seeing these penguins just walk right by you, marching in an orderly fashion, stopping at moments, just looking up at you like, "Oh, okay. I'm not sure what you are, but you're not a predator." So, and they keep marching along. And it's just, I think, again, it goes back to the beauty of nature in terms of, you know, when there isn't a threat, then there's this openness. And I think that
Mm.
to me is something I learned and something I learned and that I actually use in my, kind of day to day practice of just being and being present.
Oh, I love that. So, when thinking about all of your travels, I mean, I'm guessing that that has a beneficial impact when it comes to your day to day at work as well. I mean, to me, that's the best way to stay innovative, to see the trends that are happening, is to be out in the world and be able to see how people are experimenting. And for you, especially in the world of retail, are there ever times when you're out and about and you're kind of you bring that back into your day to day job?
Oh, definitely. It's funny because my partner always he says to me, "Oh, are you going to go out and do kind of your secret shopping today?" And I said, "Yes, I am." So we actually, I go off on my own. But yes, definitely. I think there's so much to understand and learn and why certain retailers or brands are creating their own differentiator. I actually learn quite a bit when I travel and I go to more of the small business owners and what they're doing and how they're, developing, that experience in their store. So a great example of this is I was actually in San Miguel, and when I was down in San Miguel in Mexico, there was this beautiful, architecturally designed building, and it caught my eye. And I didn't realize it was actually inside. It was a very well, positioned space that they had. You walked in, and you would be greeted with this, beautiful, artisanal coffee. And then from there, you would flow into the next room, and in that room, you were greeted by the designer who was designing these wonderful leather, covered, books. It's actually more of a cover for books or diaries, and then you'd move into the next room, and as you're weaving and wandering, which is what I was doing, I was wandering. It wasn't linear, it wasn't aisles and aisles of product with the little sticker of how much it is, etc. I was wandering. Yeah, everything was meandering. I went from room to room to room, and I ultimately got to this beautiful space that was a courtyard, opened up to the sky, and it was a restaurant, and just filled with plants and just, I mean, again, just a lot of gorgeous decorative things that made you wanna stop and just, take it all in. And when I realized it was a restaurant, I immediately said, "Oh, do you have a table? Can I sit down? I'd love to grab lunch," and just talk a little bit about, how you're doing here in this space, who created this, who was the designer, what was the philosophy and the vision behind it. So, yes,
Wow. Okay.
love
So
retail.
before I dive deeper into all of these stories, because these are super fascinating, I want to back up a bit and hear about, for anyone who doesn't know, what is Colliers? And then what does your day to day job look like there? And then I'm going to get back to the stories.
Great. Okay, sounds wonderful. Well, as you may know, Colliers is a global organization, and so we have offices scattered around the world, very focused on, core disciplines as it relates to our brokerage services, as well as property management or real estate management services, valuation, occupier, or corporate solutions. And so, what does all that mean? Is really we are here as commercial real estate advisors as it relates to industrial, healthcare, retail, office, etc. And then within that, we have our practice groups. And so we're here to help our clients from the opportunity of identifying an acquisition to help managing that project and asset to leasing to project management when new tenants are coming in or redevelopment opportunities, and then to the sales cycle when it gets there. And hopefully we can repeat that cycle over and over again. So it's really the journey of that asset and that hold sell strategy for that client.
Got it. Okay, so what is the current state of retail today? Because we know it's been, a bumpy road the past couple years, of course, and everyone has had varying opinions of, I think a year ago I remember people being like retail's dead, it's not coming back. And then of course now
Right.
you look and I think I see more store openings than, prior to 2020 and it seems like things are going great, but definitely a reimagined state of retail most likely. So,
Mhm.
what would you say the state of retail is today?
It's really interesting because I get, many people actually, as more people are coming back to the office, um, which by the way, I've been in my office since May of last year, which I love. But as more and more people are coming back into the offices, that's actually the first question they ask. When you hear about retail, people talk about, the challenges, the barriers, etc. But it look, the lockdown affected everyone. When we're locked in and it was so drastic and so instant, the lockdown here in the US, it was an immediate reaction of, oh my goodness, we haven't been in this situation before. What do we do? And so in that moment, it was really important for us to do a couple of things. One, from a retail perspective, what we really did is we said, okay, we need to take a pause. We need to make sure that we bring, all of our colleagues, all of our professionals together to ensure that we have the ability to talk through this, right? There has to be this connection point. And also to, say, hey, we're going to be out there soliciting feedback, getting information, gathering information, because we're in this really kind of unknown territory. A couple things that we did is we went and we said, okay, China's going through this and they're kind of coming out of it. What lessons have they learned through this process? And what can we do to share this back to our internal colleagues and professionals, but also our clients? And so one of the things that we actually did is we hosted a webinar series to talk through the challenges retailers were going through. So whether you're a retailer, a QSR, or a quick service restaurant, or a service restaurant, a grocery store, what are some of the things that they're experiencing? And let's hear from them and the experts in those spaces. We also pulled in our retail team from China and asked them to provide us with their sound bites of what worked, what didn't work, and what were some of the solutions around it. Because ultimately, we can sit and we can contemplate, these are issues and these are challenges, but ultimately we need to start figuring out what are those solutions if we're looking to get out of, the what we saw in 2020, which were store closures. And I should be very clear, it's not permanent store closures, but closures that occurred that impacted sales, that impacted employees, that impacted the labor force, et cetera, et cetera. And so what we did is we really wanted to understand the solution side of it so we could start to evaluate and be proactive in how we were going to advise our clients. So just to fast forward really quickly from that point, and that is retail is actually thriving. Now, I want to put the macroeconomics off to the side for a moment because they're fresh, they're new, they're happening real time. But I would like to place a little bit of, attention towards the success of retail because I think that is critical. So I'm just going to throw out a few stats if that's fine with
Yeah,
you.
go for it. I love a good stat.
A couple of things I do want to share. We did see foot traffic of stores jumped by 48% from 2020. Now, if you compare that to 2019, which is, when we started really peak, Economy was great. People were doing wonderful, spending money, etc., and traveling. That was only a difference of 28%. So we were down by 28% since 2019. So foot traffic, is constantly moving up. And we're starting to see some other components to that, which I'll share here in a moment in terms of how that is really shifting. People want to be back. They want to be out. They want to socialize. They want to grab, dinner and those moments and those special experiences with their family and friends. So I don't see that slowing down. Yes, the various variants of COVID are coming into play, but people are saying, look, we're tired of being locked up. We want to, um, go and hang out with our friends that we haven't seen. So we're definitely seeing that pick up. I mean, I've traveled now, quite a bit over the last 6 months. And I have to say, in the last 4 to 5 months, every flight domestic has been full, and most
Yeah.
flights international have been full as well.
hmm Same. Yeah, I've
Um,
seen the same thing.
yeah, would you agree? So, the
Oh
other
yeah.
thing I want to just throw out there too is when we look at retail sales, the retail sales year over year has actually gone up by close to 19%. And I think that's really important to highlight because you can slice and dice sales in different categories, but overall, not including, auto, sales have steadily increased. And I think it's important because when people ask, well, why are sales increasing, Angie? I mean, we have to stop and take a pause and think about the population base. We're definitely seeing also an increase in our population base. We're also seeing an increase of this transfer of people from different companies to the U.S. or out of the U.S. And that transfer is also a transfer of in terms of how people are spending. So you're going to see a higher concentration of spend in certain classifications and goods. And so I think that's really critical. And then the last thing to note is in retail, one thing I always share here in the US, we have been over retailed for a very long time. This isn't in the last 10 years. We're talking, you know, last 20 years. So for every person, there's roughly 23 square feet per person of retail. And if you compare that to our European countries, they're closer to, 7 square feet. So big difference. So there had to be this, what I call resetting of, our footprint within retail, which is not a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. And so we have seen store closures with a lot of the, call it national brands. But what that has allowed us to see is that we are now at a place where store openings have actually outpaced store closings since 2014.
Yeah, and these are newer stores though that are opening, not the brands that closed and reopening again.
Actually a combination. So I
Okay.
would say certain brands that have closed are reopening, but they're being much more efficient in where and how they're opening and why they're opening. So it's a combination of the two.
hmm Got it. I mean, that
Yeah.
makes sense when you think about, the world of retail every 20 years or so, it has to, completely
hmm
change and reinvent itself. What do you think now going forward is like a successful strategy when thinking about retail stores and, opening a location? I have tons of, guests who come on the show who say, retail actually is a huge opportunity. It's a great way to, have a better interaction with your customer and get first party, data that maybe it's harder to do online now. But thinking
hmm
about what does that model look like, that is not just, how it looked maybe in 2019, because I don't think many people, like, expectations are different now and consumers are going to want things to be a lot more efficient than they used to be a couple of years ago. What have you seen, or what do you think, the future of retail should look like?
Yeah, it's a great question because you're seeing this combination of so many different channels merging together, right? It's this integrated approach. And if you really stop and think about what does omni-channel really mean, um, you know, it's a big fancy word. Ultimately, if you can stop and go, okay, what does the shopper want? The shopper's looking for multiple channels to buy from. So online, curbside pickup, delivery, on-demand delivery, in-store shopping, now metaverse, etc. But ultimately, what they're looking for is multiple channels because the multiple channels assists or helps them with from a convenience factor, right? So they
Yep.
want convenience. The shopper wants the ability to buy immediately, which with supply chain right now can be a challenge.
Yep.
But they want, that continued immediate. They also want the ability to evaluate what they're buying, right? To understand the quality behind it, to understand possibly even, the best practices behind that brand or product in terms of sustainability or their kind of goals around that. So the shopper is really who's defining how we're creating a lot of the retail channels and nodes. And so when I think about retail, where retail is going, it's very fascinating to me because it really needs to check a lot of these boxes. And there are a handful of retailers that have actually put capital, invested capital, many, many years ago. We're talking 15 years ago, as it relates to online shopping and buying habits, and taking that data over time and now being able to really optimize that data into their retail stores. And so a great example of that is, now if you're walking to go do some mass merchandising type shopping, the minute you pull into the parking lot, you'll actually get pinged on your phone saying, "Oh, hey, we have this special today on a particular product." Well, that product is something that you may not have thought about buying, right? It could be, I'm just going to make this up. It's a certain type of soda that they're marketing. And you're just really going there to get milk. Well, now that you see it, there's a higher probability that you're going to actually buy that product because it's, limited offer, it's on sale or what have you. And you're going to go in and when you make that second purchase that you weren't expecting to make, that just creates a better margin ultimately for that retailer. So retailers really need to look at this because they're constantly being squeezed in terms of margins. The that cost continues to go up. So the cost of doing business online is continuing to go up because of you know, getting the item shipped, the different points of shipment, the different points of return, um, the service around that. Same with stores. You have cost of labor, etc., and then you have the supply chain costs, and so all of these costs, yes, they're impacting retail, but they're also impacting the consumer.
Hmm. So it seems like, I mean, when I see the moves right now that some retailers that I'm interacting with are making, they seem like they're pretty small, like small incremental improvements. And
Hmm.
when I'm interacting with that, sometimes I think, is there a space for this more like a platform to come in to solve many problems at once? Because if you think about it, a consumer might come in and they, might see, oh, here's a discount code for whatever it might be, this makeup item. But from my side, I'm thinking, okay, well, then I need to see what does this cost elsewhere? And of course, that store is not going to show me that. And then I need to see discount codes elsewhere. And maybe if there's any other loyalty programs I can get in, like there's so many data points that I think
Yeah.
we're expecting now as a consumer when we go into a retail location, that it seems like the retailers alone won't be able to probably solve that problem because they're just offering, the push notifications and things where it's like, well, that's not kind of helpful, but not really when you have expectations of what you're able to do online really, really quickly to then getting back
Hmm.
to that like one-to-one relationship. Do you agree with
It's
that
it's
or?
um it's it's a challenge. I mean, there's no doubt about it. It's a very challenging um environment, whether it's retail or not, right? It's almost kind of like the whole coming back to work, or some people are saying, I want to work remotely versus coming into the office. But, it's so important to have that brand or customer loyalty, I should say. And to your point, I always say this, that in the past you had such strong customer loyalty programs and VIP programs and events, etc. It's lost a little bit of that luster. I think it's faded because the buyers become somewhat fickle. And to your point, I think it's because there's so many channels to shop from.
Hmm.
You get inundated by, if you're on Pinterest, now Pinterest is sending you, Facebook is sending you, then you're going to go and shop it on Amazon. Um, you know, to me, there's so much information out there. It's information overload. And that's why I feel that retailers, I mean, I feel for them, I really do, because they have to take all of that data and technology and then wrap that into how do you run a highly optimized and efficient store, and then all the other components too with, like I said, curbside and delivery. And these are not small tasks. When you ask the question, well, who does this well? You know, for a moment, when I think about small businesses, I think about, the challenge that they have gone through. It was really difficult for them because they actually, when the lockdown occurred, we were going, oh my goodness, a lot of our landlords were very concerned. Well, what will happen to these really successful small business operators that we have? Yes, we can help them, from, as it relates to their leases, with some minor concessions, but what's the longevity? And I actually thought that was a really important time for us to stop again and go, what's the solution? And I'll share why, because immediately we were like, we don't want to lose these brands. These are great small boutiques that, you know, make this shopping center or this project unique. Yes, we have, the other national brands there, but people want to come into a project and go into a store and say, hey, Michelle, how are you? What are you doing? Going back to that personal one-on-one touch. What's the latest thing that you went out when you went to, Atlanta or to the last, show to find some new trends in fashion or what have you. So it was important for us to figure out, like, how do we keep them? How do we bring them back? That's not a financial concession, but kind of gives them an opportunity to take their business beyond that storefront. And that's where we actually started to partner with Shopify. And with Shopify, we said, okay, how can we take these small businesses and boutiques and have them and provide them with the expertise of having a online shop plus a brick and mortar, so they have various sales channels to grow their business. And we had a handful of people say, hey, I'm ready, I need that help, because we were closed and I had nowhere to place my inventory.
Hmm.
And
So,
I have no desire to discount my inventory, by 80%. So those that jumped in to say, I'm scared because I've never done this before, but to have a partner who has, and a company like ours to help kind of bridge that gap, that was a solution that we really brought forth and we were quite proud of.
yeah, very cool. Yeah, I mean, e-commerce definitely now looking back, it's like, oh yeah, that's a great solution when everything is happening the way it
Yeah.
is. But when thinking about, these companies you work with, these partners, I mean, what's the most innovative like retail transformation you've seen, or what are maybe some of your customers doing that you're like, oh wow, that's actually thinking outside the box? Because I mean, the best stories that I'm reading about right now are always the ones who are reinventing themselves completely and not just, making the marginal improvements, but they're saying, okay, if I were
Mhm.
to do this all over again, I think it's like there was an example about Bell Labs in like the 1950s where the VP came in and said, hey, pretend, this phone that we invented is now dead and it doesn't work. How would you all do this from scratch? And then they came up with like voicemail and conference rooms and mobile phones and all these things because they pretended that, what they had up until then that they had created was now gone forever. And so that's like the stories that I've been looking for now when it comes to retail. Like, how are people thinking differently? And I would love it if you have any, examples about, companies that you're working with or partners who are kind of thinking very outside the box, other than, moving to e-commerce, which, yes, that's a great thing to do, of course, but like really
Right.
reimagining the world of retail.
Yeah, so I haven't been to this one yet, because I haven't been to New York yet. But in New York, it's my understanding that Taco Bell actually down in Times Square. Have you been to that one yet? Where you can,
So we had Taco Bell on the show, and I might know what you're about to say, but I still want to hear it.
okay. Okay, yeah, sure. And so, we were talking actually to one of their peers, and they were so jazzed around it, right? Which was this whole, call it experience of ordering it from more of a technology kind of platform or play. And so from their perspective, they just thought it was really cool. Now, again, I haven't been in there, so my goal is to go check it out and see that. But kind of staying on that line, of course, the last place I went to, which was I think 2 months ago, was the Amazon, their actual large footprint grocery store. Um, and I actually went in there more so just looking around and watching how people were experiencing the store, because when you walk in, it has a lot of resemblance to, a Whole Foods experience in store. And so when I was there, I was kind of watching just the ease, right? People are just going, they're just picking up things or putting it in, and then they're getting to the end zone there, if you want to call it. And then they got stuck a little bit. They got a little stuck, and I was like, oh no, I'm actually seeing carts stack up. That's not the intent of this. I know the intent is to just kind of have this like boom, you picked everything, it shows up on your phone, and then you're out the door. I think we're all still going through this learning phase. And so I can see why you're seeing incremental improvements, because there's still a lot of learning
Mhm.
from the person that's actually shopping, and trying to understand what it is to, um, you know, getting through the start to finish of that experience. And I think I know we will get there. I don't, from a timing standpoint, I think we're still in that early phase. And so to answer that question, there isn't anything that really like jumps out at me at this point, because um, it hasn't been so innovative. Now, what I have seen, and this is I'm speaking, more so here in the U.S. I've definitely seen a lot of vision boards about things that people would like to do. A tremendous amount, and I think that is fantastic. So if we could really um, hit the nail or the target on, call it testing this and then getting it as close to right as possible so that overall customer experience is really good and memorable, then you will definitely start seeing these roll out much more. But don't forget, it's also expensive at the same
Mhm.
time. And so, what I mean by that is when I look at these vision boards that a lot of these retailers are putting together, and or developers that are looking to cluster these more innovative experiences uh, of retail. It's fascinating to see the what they're creating, and some of the things that I've seen is, definitely more showrooms where you're
Yep.
walking in and you're just like, it's like wow, all of your senses are just, it's over the top, from, sight, smell, sound, taste, touch, all of those things. And I think they're also the people that are going to be presenting the product to you. It's going to be much more of a presentation, so the buy-in occurs quite quickly. you're like you said, you're seeing it in, these little incremental kind of bubbles. But we're not there yet. We're definitely
Yeah.
not there. I mean, ringing the bell at the Tesla, store in the mall because someone just signed up to buy a Tesla and put I forget, was it I forget now if it's $100 or $1,000. I can't remember now.
$100
Um,
down.
yeah, it's like, and everyone's clapping. It's
Yeah.
it's great, it's cute, but the vision boards that I've been seeing, it's a very kind of more immersive experience as well.
Yeah. So what's maybe the most interesting vision board you've seen? Like how are they
Oh
making it so
gosh.
immersive or what are they doing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if I can share the actual experience, but think of it as gaming meets retail meets collaboration. It's the
Got it.
best way because
Okay.
what's happening is, yeah, if you can kind of, if I can try to articulate this, it's like if you were to go to, your friend's house and they're like, hey, we're gonna just like throw up on the screen, I'm from the era of Pac-Man, so, or Centipede,
Yeah.
and we're gonna play a game of Centipede, and I'm like, yeah, let's play a game of Centipede, and as you're playing the game of Centipede, you're sharing with your friend or your friends, right? You're eating, you're drinking, you're talking, but you're going to say, wow, wouldn't it be cool if they did this or if they did that? And I think what this will act as is a collaboration space for those retailers to collect information. And when they collect information, they're getting real time information of what the consumer really wants. And hopefully, they're taking really strong notes and taking that back to the developers to kind of redevelop, reinvent. And so, that one thing I mentioned earlier is, the one thing constant in retail is change in retail reinventing itself. That's where you're going to get this collaboration and input.
Yep. Yep. Love it. Yeah, I saw a very interesting article about it was a I mean, it all, of course, depends on industry. So this just works for more commoditized industries. But there was a grocery store, and they had a store in somewhere in Asia, and they were
Uh-huh.
noticing that the shoppers weren't really going anymore. I guess they didn't have enough time, and whatever was happening, they wanted to look into it and change it up a bit. And so instead, they took over a whole subway and they put pictures of the items that they had in their grocery store all along the
Hmm.
wall of the subway train. And then people could just scan their phone and start checking out with things that they needed, and it would be delivered in 2 hours. And that to me, I was like, oh, genius. No one really wants to go into a grocery store, but it
Right.
is helpful to be reminded, of the aisles to be able to be like, oh, yeah, I do actually need that, or that's a good reminder. I'll just shop for that now. And I love reading stories about that just show very different ways of thinking and, um, you know,
Hmm.
putting retail in different locations and kind of seeing what comes from it.
Yeah, there has to be that adoption rate as well, right? So when you think about Asia and their use of the digital wallet, their
Hmm.
smart devices, etc., they're so advanced. The one thing they were sharing when we had our webinar, our team out of China, what they shared was the WeChat and how
Yeah.
owners and developers in Asia actually partnered in creating basically this forum for their consumers to talk about the products and the stores within that mall. And they found a lot of interesting, ways to, I guess, approach and reach. And so here in the U.S., we're still a little behind in that regard, and that I think is it's good because it's not putting more pressure on the retailers, right? And the owners and developers to get their projects ready from a infrastructure perspective. But hopefully we're learning from all these things. I agree with you. I mean, was Alibaba has a grocery store, and one of the things that they did is, you can scan like the QR code of that product and then you can see the journey so you know how
Yeah.
fresh that product is and
Hmm.
who the farmer is. So with Alibaba, it was really fascinating. I haven't been to one of the Alibaba's grocery stores, but what I loved was it reminded me of IKEA. Like when you go into IKEA and I don't know about you. I'm going there because I'm just so curious about what do they
Oh yeah.
have and their
I have no
designs,
goals.
etc.
I'm just there to
Yeah,
wander.
exactly. Yeah, I just wander and walk around, but I always get hungry when I go to IKEA and when I go to grocery stores. And so, if you read, from, the founder of IKEA, one thing he had said was, when people come to IKEA, they always associate that with it's a very long shopping journey. So what happens? They get really hungry. Hence the reason why he put in the restaurant concept. And so when you think about Alibaba and their grocery stores, they did the same thing. I don't know about you. When I go to a grocery store, I'm hungry, but
Yeah.
I want to buy it all, right? And I'm not ready to make it, but I want to eat something really quick. So I thought it was fascinating how, they also have, the restaurant concept attached to their grocery stores. And then again, going back to being innovative, everything, yes, is through a QR code. And then it's, just being delivered. And if you stop and think about what they're doing, Whole Foods actually started doing
Yeah.
that years ago, right? And in a lot of their locations, they still have that kind of bar, restaurant slash
Hmm.
casual component. Although I think those are slowly going away now.
Oh, are they? They're
Um,
still big in Austin. They have them at,
yeah, that's the first one I saw was in Austin. I love
yeah.
that location.
Yeah. And they had them in the Bay Area too. But the one thing I always think is missing is that they should have whatever restaurant they have, it should be
Hmm.
serving ingredients from Whole Foods. And then with that, it's like, here's your recipe list to make exactly what you just ate. I feel like there's such a big
That
opportunity missing right now. Like, okay, you have your salad bar, you have a random hamburger, but it's not like, well, here's actually how to make the hamburger. Go to aisle 5 and grab these 3
Yeah.
ingredients, and then you
Oh,
can
I
have what
think
you just
that's
had.
brilliant. Yeah, that is totally brilliant. I mean, to your point, it's like you got to keep the customer engaged at every point of that journey,
Hmm.
and that's a post journey,
Yep.
right? Experience. No, I agree with you. I mean, there were some smaller grocers in the central region that were trying to incorporate, the like cooking.
Hmm.
And
Yep.
if you go to the Italy in New York, their first one, they had, I think the bottom floor was a kind of a cooking stage and format.
Hmm.
Oh, there's
Yeah.
so many cool
So many
opportunities. Yeah.
opportunities. We will fix all of them, Angie. We just need to start sending out some
Yes.
letters, get on their radar. We can solve all the
Hmm.
problems.
Yes.
All right. So to wrap up this interview, I always like to ask, what are you most excited about in the next 1 to 2 years?
I would say I am most excited about actually seeing many of these online concepts expand into brick and mortar. And my hope is that, they will take their craft and quality and that really beautiful virtual experience that you have. And as they roll out into brick and mortar and storefronts, that they continue that from a design and aesthetics because I think it's brilliant to see how they're utilizing space and design and that collaboration with the consumer versus, someone just coming into a store and leaving without even saying, a word to those that are there assisting. Yeah.
Love it. Well, Angie, thanks so much for coming on the show. Where can people find out more about you and what you're up to at Colliers?
So to find out more about what we're up to at Colliers, specifically in retail and in any of our other sectors, you can reach us at either colliers.com for more information or at knowledge-leader-colliers.com. And we have all our topics there from, as I mentioned, retail, industrial, supply chain, office, you name it. There's some amazing expertise and topics that you can roll through.
If you're looking for the #1 platform for all things commerce, there's no better choice. So definitely go check it out at salesforce.com/commerce.